Good morning. Hang on. So
Morning.
there's been an update to Zoom, and the people are waiting message changed. So I didn't see you and Matt waiting in the waiting room. Looks like Matt's joining right now. So I was taking a look. I was taking a look at some questions that we've gotten about the impact of generative AI on product management. And one of the things that people are asking a lot about is prioritization and how we can use these tools to help with prioritization. I'm not sure. I've been giving that a little bit of thought. And I am not 100% sure that the job of prioritization, this key function of product management, is going to change all that much with generative AI. I think the models are still the same. It's a matter of how we get the data. Curious if you have any thoughts on that as well. And we're frozen. Seems to be having trouble getting in. All right. There we go. Good morning, Elle. Good morning, Kristen. We've had a little got some technical glitches going on this morning.
I was going to ask if it was on my side. I lost. You were saying something, and I lost everything you said.
Yeah, you froze for a moment and then went dark. So it looks like Matt's been trying to join since you got in, and it still says joining.
He pinged me. I don't know. I mean, freezing and going dark, that's just so typical for me.
Well, lately I've been having this problem where everyone can see me, but I can't see myself. So it's not really a problem, but it's kind of jarring. So
no, that can be a problem.
Yes.
If you don't know you're being seen or you can't see what they're saying.
Right.
And for those who are watching us on YouTube, we're working through what appears to be a wide variety of technical difficulties this morning, but we'll get it all straightened out here in the next couple minutes. So just stand by. We'll be with you. Feel free to say hi out there in the YouTube chat as well while you're sitting here. Morning, Steve. How are you? Got Daniel.
Doing well. Sorry, I was muted.
All right, that's all right. Good. No problem.
Hey,
Daniel. We got Daniel from Lease Query popping in here.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. We're going to give just a few more minutes for some folks to join and introduce some new folks. Let some new folks make some introductions and see if anybody else has anything on their mind. And we'll start our main topic here right about 8 o'clock.
Nobody ever has anything new on their mind in product, right? It's just all.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, you set off on this course and it's kind of preset. You just study up on the main topics. It's like being a doctor, right? Totally.
Yep.
Once you know all about elbows, that's all there is to know.
So while we're waiting on a few more folks to join in, what's got your attention these days, Steve?
We are rapidly trying to negotiate a big contract with a customer, which will involve building a new product. So it's not just a customer, they're an investor, potential investor. And the use of funds will be to build this product that they then will go out and sell and have a requirement for delivery of revenues. So it's not just product, it's company as well too. And it's investment. It's a bunch of things wrapped up into one. So been going through the requirements, looking at what we have to build, trying to prepare my head for the fact that we'll have a good 2 to 3 month run
Yeah.
of build. So we're sort of pre-designing, even though we haven't gotten the money in yet.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's had my attention the last probably week. And in fact, there's really two of us that are the founders, Jonathan and myself. Jonathan was in Houston last week trying to negotiate that, and he's back in New Orleans again today. I'm lucky I get to sit right here. He always going, so are we going? I'm like, I'll stay here. So
Like, that makes you the lucky one. I guess I'm 100% on the adventure side of let's go.
well, I think some of the folks know here, I've been in product for 33 years. And for 7 years before that, I worked as a financial analyst at two big banks. So I spent a lot of time traveling. So I've been, and I've also founded companies and run companies, and it even launched with a startup out of San Francisco, launched everything outside the US from an operating standpoint. So I don't really, there's just not things I haven't seen yet. And in fact, I kind of dig hanging out with the dog and cat and wife a lot more. So
yeah. On the other hand, I worked with Jonathan years ago at IBM, and that is a man who's not afraid to get on a plane.
Yeah, just to let you guys know, my co-founder, who he and I worked at before IBM, he and I worked at Netscape together back in the 90s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so he's also a pastor of a church on the side.
Oh.
So, and I run his site. So I get to see his sermons every Sunday as I'm, loading them up on his site. And I'm also a volunteer at my wife's the Computer Museum. For those who haven't been. A pretty amazing place up in Roswell. If you're in the Atlanta area, it's a good place to go. So I'm also a volunteer there. We had a freak out. First of all, they said, we've got to tax memberships. Okay, fine. Change is done. We can't tax memberships. Okay, change is done. So yesterday I got the word on that. So I get to learn new things every day. And sometimes it doesn't seem like it's product, but maybe it is.
Okay.
And by the way, they're having a big exhibit.
Interesting places. Sorry,
they're having a big, they're having another event. They have a quarterly event. I think they call it now Museum After Hours, but they're going to showcase punch cards, but not the IBM punch cards you may have seen. And for those who don't know, I started writing applications on punch cards back in the late 70s at college. I know you're going, college in the 70s? What? But they're going to showcase the Jacquard loom that they have there, which is a, sort of another origin of punch cards. Anyway, so if you're not doing anything next week on June 23rd, it's a good chance to go and meet some people. A lot of people in the tech world show up there here in Metro Atlanta, and they'll actually have a live punch card machine, their IBM punch card machine. You can put the cards in, punch them, and that's about it. But anyway, it's fun.
That is so cool. I'm going to tag on that story, Steve, and say just to highlight the broadness of time across product. My claim to fame was screwing up my grandfather's punch card program that he made the mistake of bringing home himself. Because apparently there's an order the punch cards had to go in.
You don't
and
drop
you were
them.
not supposed to play dominoes on the floor with them.
That is very, very
that's
correct.
What I thought they were.
As a freshman at the University of Florida, I have dropped them. I did drop them. And it was like, well, all for naught now.
My grandfather, I was a favorite grandchild, and he walked in the room and he looked at the floor and he looked at me and he looked at the floor and he looked at me, and then he just yelled, "Betty!" and walked out of the room. Betty was my grandmother.
When I was growing up, my dad was a newspaper publisher, and this was back in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And they didn't have punch cards. They had computers at the newspaper, but they didn't have punch cards. They had these typesetting computers, and the stories would go into these long yellow tapes and would have little dots punched out. And these dots made the most wonderful confetti that I would throw all over the office. It was amazing. And then they would get fed into another machine that would lay out the type on, and then they burn that into the plate. So it's a really cool process. I think it's much more digital these days, but back there, the old manual and semi-manual processes were just really cool to see. So.
You've always been this person then, the confetti bomb person.
Oh, totally. 100%. So
don't take Jason to a venue that you don't know if you can have confetti or stickers. The thing.
She is not even a little bit wrong. So I want to welcome Kermie, who's here for the first time. If I got your name right, I hope. If not, you can feel free to correct me. And I won't necessarily put you on the carpet yet, but I'd love to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself in a moment. what we do here for about the first half an hour or so of Product Coffee every week is we just get to know each other, talk a little bit, have a good old fashioned coffee networking meetup. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to get people to introduce themselves. And if you have not been here before, I try to get to you sooner rather than later. And I ask a couple questions, and I only do this if your camera is on. If your camera's on, I'll invite you to introduce yourself. If it's not, I won't call you. I won't call you out in front of everybody else. But I'd like to know, who you are, where you're from, and one of the big questions that we love to hear about is what has your attention right now. And that might be a product management question that you're trying to get an answer for, that you're trying to solve for. It might be something that you're celebrating, a victory that you want to get some virtual high fives or some applause for. Maybe you had a big launch, or you solved a problem that you've been working on for some time. So what I'll do is I'll just start going around and calling on some folks to say hello. And I've got a few folks who have not been here very much, and it's been a little while since we've seen. So I definitely want to do some introductions, and let's start with. Let's go ahead and start with our friend Brian Huss, who's back for the first time in a little while. Welcome back, Brian.
Hi, yeah, thank you. It has been a bit of a wacky time, but happy to join today. So yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Brian Huss. I'm the VP of Product at Buzzer, which is a startup related to some sports, live sports streaming and data science technology. And Jason, you and I were talking about this last time I was on. What has my attention right now is I have been doing B2C product leadership in kind of bigger media brands came into the startup that was also B2C and was past tense because they announced a pivot about 6 weeks ago, going in more of a B2B direction. And yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to be how to take all the stuff that I used to do around direct connections with, kind of the end user and turn that into, how am I doing discovery with people who might want to buy this technology? How do I be an effective product leader in a B2B environment? It's different for sure.
Very good. So yeah, it is, I think for me, and I'd love to hear some other folks' input on this as far as the differences in B2B discovery versus B2C discovery is, B2B discovery, one of the things that I have experienced is when you have someone, when you're having a conversation, when you're doing an interview, especially, your interviewee tends to be more bought in than a B2C. I mean, a B2C, a consumer interview, those can be really interesting and people get really excited, but the dollars are so much higher. The value for the business buyer is so much higher as a general rule in B2B than it is for B2C. There are career implications in B2B, so they're more bought in. They're going to bring a lot more vocal opinions, and they're going to worry much less about hurting your feelings. And those are some broad generalizations, but those are a few deep characteristics. And the other big difference is in B2C, you have access to a lot of discovery data at scale that it's harder to come by in a B2B environment, because when you're dealing with those accounts, there's just not as many of them in a lot of cases. So those are some of the broad stroke differences for me. I'd love it if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
I'd also say too that the frequency with which you roll out software is different in B2C. B2C, you can roll out quite often, but in B2B, you not only have the potential to impact mission critical things, you also have cycles that are just natural, whether that's retail cycles when there's cutoffs. And so I think that impacts how you develop, how you roll out. And it's amazing how the B2B world has tried to mimic the B2C to its detriment. And I still have people saying, no, we have to roll it more quickly. I'm like, you can't. How do you know that? It's like, well, I'm in my 60s, that's why. And, I just think that does impact how you build and roll out. And but I still think we need the creativity and fun and newness that we get in the B2C world. So we've got to try to marry those two.
Absolutely. Very good. Kristen, you had some comments in the chat. Do you want to leave them in the chat, or do you want to jump out here?
Oh, sure. I can jump out. So I work for a big acquisition company, and we do engineering stuff. So we have a lot of so the big point for us is that when I'm doing discovery, there's a difference between the purchaser and the actual user. Very often they're different people. So I not only have to satisfy the user requirements, I have to satisfy the purchaser requirements. And especially when it comes to marketing, we're doing this solution based thing instead of, so when we have our what's new webinar, instead of framing it around, okay, feature, which is what my users want to see. They just want a breakdown of all the new stuff, but we're reframing it in a problem, solution, action framework. But that also means I can't get through everything. So, but on the discovery side of things, I'm, at the end of the day, my user is the most important person. If they can't use it, purchaser's not going to buy it.
Right.
I was so glad you said that in the chat, Kristen. I said the big point because I think people so often forget it. I can't tell you how many times, how many people, how big and important those people were, how much I was pretty sure they should know this better. Forget, right, that's the thing in the banking space, which many, me today, I've been in fintech and banking for a long time. The people who have the need, right, is B2B to B2C. If you're selling software into a bank, the person who's buying the software is obviously important to you, but the needs ultimately are the needs of all of us. What happens to your bank account? What drives the things that the bank is trying to sell you as services, which is how they're monetizing their product. That's important, right? But at the same time, it's very different. So you need to understand that end user being the C part, but you have to understand and have the personas, right? And understand the buying requirements around the buyer, the user at the bank. And then I always thought of it as the influencer, right? Sometimes there's this person who's the secret buyer in the room. And I've seen too many salespeople go in and completely blow a deal that was already in the bag simply because they ignored the important person in the room, which was not the person signing the check.
Yeah, that's right on. I mean, we just did this, right? So we've gotten to the first round. We kind of done the first round of like the BD people sorts of meetings, and encouragingly, no one has said, "Oh, that's stupid. Nobody would want that." Everybody has said, "Like, okay, this is a thing." And
tell me more.
And so now it's like, one, how do we get from like the biz dev layer to the actual product tech implementation layer? And then how we get from like, nice to have to must have, it's like an exercise in storytelling and positioning that we're all kind of figuring out how to do better.
Very good. So yeah, it's a great topic to get the blood pumping and start the day with today. And that's actually probably would make some really good content to pursue down the road as well. A little bit more of the B2B versus B2C comparison, because there are a lot of people. Your company is evolving and starting to think about a B2B experience where you've been focused and where you started in B2C. A lot of people are also choosing new paths and new companies right now and finding themselves in new product management roles. And those differences become pretty amplified. You start to notice some of those differences when you have a lot of these conversations anyway, just kind of hearing people in context that aren't familiar to you. But when you have to make that move, it becomes much more visible.
Right.
Thanks for throwing that out there, Brian. Good to have you back.
Thanks.
I'm not going to call you out here on the camera because you're driving, but I want to welcome Sarah, who's joining us for the first time today. And I would like to, I see Kermie's got your camera on. So why don't you unmute and say hello and tell everybody what has your attention today?
I want to make sure that's me.
That's Sarah.
Are you calling me out as Sarah?
Oh, the same person? I just said hello to you and did not want you to have to talk while you were driving. So yeah, you're safe. Thanks, Sarah. And it looks like I may have chased Kermie off. That's too bad. All right, so let's just switch gears. Oh no, there you are. There you are. Hey.
Hello. Yeah,
there we are. Hi.
Yeah, but maybe some problem. I just cannot open my camera. Maybe I have to make of the privacy first.
That's happened
And
to me with Zoom before. It has layered protections to keep you from inadvertently sharing things that you probably shouldn't.
All right. Well, we'll come back to you in a few minutes if we can. Carmi, am I pronouncing your name correctly though?
yes, that's right.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, welcome. And we'll come back to you and do an introduction here in a moment if you can get that camera on.
Yeah. I just a few minutes later, I just checked the privacy first. Thank you. Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds great. All right, and I know we got a couple of. I know we've got Dan from Lease Query, and we're going to be hearing a lot more from you in a moment. But why don't you introduce yourself real quick, Daniel?
Yeah, hello. I work in B2B product management now, but my past life worked as a B2C e-commerce product manager and kind of grew up that way. And now lead the product management discipline at LeaseQuery. So you asked what is on top of mind for me. And
Yep.
I think top of mind for me is balancing out kind of retention and new product development. Sorry.
Those things that you need to ensure the renewals,
Yep.
and the things that you need to attract and grow in the market overall. Always a really tough balancing act. Are you finding that your existing customers are just really, without getting into trade secrets or anything like that, are you finding that growth is requiring a new track of innovation, or is it just really kind of more of the shoring up table stakes?
I think it's both, right? So like for us, we're super niche accounting software. And so to be the best in the world at that, right, you have to provide a lot of edge cases, and people expect that, but also they would like other new products as well. So it's kind of that balance.
Gotcha. Yep. I know we've had quite a few conversations about that with some other folks on your team as well. But it's an exciting space, and has been placed, at least Query is placed very high on the Inc. 500, which is the fastest growing privately held companies. That's hard to sustain for many years, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen one more time. So do we know when those numbers come out?
I'm not counting down, but yes.
Fair enough. Well, welcome, Daniel. Glad to have you here. And we've also got Matt Burris joining us today, and we'll hear a little bit more from you in a few minutes. But why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what has your attention these days?
Yeah, my name is Matt Burris. I spend most of my time in the startup space, 0 to 1, finding new products. Although I spent the last 6 years almost at NCR on the innovation team there. And right now, what really has my attention is figuring out how to build and maintain communities to assist with product development in the B2B space.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty diverse and fun and exciting space. I've been spending a little bit of time on building and maintaining communities there as well. So glad to have some chats about that anytime you like as well. But as has Holly, and I know you're plugged in tightly with Holly. So really good to see you. Really looking forward to hearing what you're working on in some of the startup work that you're doing right now as well here in a few minutes. So welcome. Glad to have you. Let's see here. And I see we've got Elle Carell. Hi, Elle. How are you?
I'm good. I'm Elle Carell. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I run a craft cidery. And so I got into this space at the beginning of COVID when we launched an e-commerce website, and I've just fallen in love with the digital side of things. And but the reason that I'm here is my background's in linguistics. That's what I studied, and I know that there's obviously lots of connections between linguistics and AI. So I'm on a fact-finding mission of my skills currently and what skills could I pick up and just to be useful in whatever is coming for us.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. That's a really cool crossover. First of all, I think cider helps. So
it does.
Big win here for me.
I was gonna
Totally
say
my
my friend Holly has a special place in her heart for cider.
I love it. I love it. And Holly, you're from Atlanta, right?
Well, I'm not from here, but I'm here currently.
Okay. Okay, cool.
I'm not sure anybody is actually from here.
Yeah, right? I'm always intrigued when I meet somebody who's from
Sorry.
Atlanta.
I am from
Um,
Atlanta.
Ah,
All
All right,
right.
Hannah, we got one.
So
Yeah, I've got a good friend down that way who runs Treehorn. Her name's Nikki. She's great. So if you're into cider, check it
There, you will have to message about that. Send me some deets.
out.
Where is this place? and did
we're
you
gonna-
engineer your name? Because that is too perfect. El Corral.
No, I got married and it just rhymed. It was great.
So you knew he was the one.
Right. There were some dangerous dates before that. One was one notable one was last name Lloyd. I was going to sound like an alien, so that would have been perfect.
I dumped a guy during a proposal because I told him that his last name made me sound like a side dish.
Oh
Just didn't want to sound like rice pilaf for the rest of my life. So
Yeah,
not always a nice
got
person.
lucky. Just got lucky.
Well, welcome. And the topic is really spot on. I think today we're not going to be as deep on the language. We may be. I don't know what Matt's going to tell us about. We may be a little bit on the kind of language side of things, but I know over the next few weeks we're going to be exploring this topic with quite a few different sessions. We're going to talk about AI tools next week. We'll talk about that in a moment. And we're going to talk about ethics in AI in a few weeks as well, ethical deployment and the responsibilities that come on as we're thinking about these technologies. And we're going to announce later today a new series of in-person local forums where we're going to go really deep on AI and product management and have some deep discussions on many of these technologies, how they work, and how to think about them. So glad to have you here. Welcome, Elle, and looking forward to tracking down some of your cider. You have to send me the details as well, as because I do get out on the road occasionally and can find it occasionally. So
Awesome.
so welcome. And we've got time for maybe one more. Let's see who we haven't heard from in a little while that has their camera on. Hey, Lisa Crimes, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. You know how much I love mornings.
I do. What's got your attention today?
How I could get a bigger cup of coffee.
Mhm.
No, I appreciate all the comments this morning. That there's a fun discussion around B2B, but the primary thing that has my attention right now. So Lisa Crimes, I am from Atlanta. One of the two now that are from here. I'm a fractional C-suite executive, so I'm helping a couple of companies with sales, marketing, product. But one of those projects is I'm working with a very large pharmaceutical company, and I'm helping them roll out an innovation function. So I've been working on how we bring some different models and portfolio perspectives and educate them on how to do it. But one thing I've never done before is actually have a research team that's going to go out and scan the market and bring back using like the McKinsey 3 Horizon model, bring back a bunch of different ideas that we're going to feed into this model that I created that we're going to present to the client. So it's a lot of fun, but I've never done it like this. And I'm where I'm kind of struggling a little bit and learning is just how to set that research team up so that they have the guardrails, that they know what the strategic intent is, and that they can bring us back opportunities that we can, and as advisors, that we can initially vet and then run through a model and present to the client. So not sure if anybody's ever done that, but I'm open to learning more. So if anybody's done it, I need some advice as I'm going through it.
Are you familiar with Insights Association?
I am not.
They're a group out of DC, and they're primarily market research.
Yeah.
They do a lot of online stuff, and kind of like, what Jason does here. During COVID, a lot of stuff was free, which, I took advantage of. I would just connect with them, attend one of their events, and just reach out. Insights Association.
Okay, nice. I mean, I actually have researchers. The team has, so there are researchers that do this, but it's a lot of it is giving them the guardrails and the understanding. And this is very specifically in the pharma space. But they're launching over into extension into insurance tech and digital health and the implications of that around pharma. If that helps explain it a little bit more.
So yeah, the research in terms of guidelines, what I found is really helpful is to work backwards from your ultimate outcome and then think about what you need at each input point along the way. And we can have a longer conversation about this offline if you want as well. But because the question is, who's going to use the outcome of each stage and what are they going to use it for? And full progression helps to inform the research team design and structure for them and put those guardrails that you're talking about. If we know very clearly that step 2 is going to be a workshop with stakeholders to review the findings and make some priority decisions about what's next, then that informs one part of the research. Or if the research is going to, or if, pardon me, step 2 is going to be go to prototyping a solution, then that changes kind of how you want to approach the research. So there are a couple of different ways to approach that and think about it. But definitely would be glad to have some more conversations about that and spin up some more discussion.
That's awesome. Thank you. I've been embracing my inner John Mansour teachings along the way because it's portfolio management. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and just applying that stage gate through the 3 horizons is, yeah, we definitely should talk more.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome, Lisa. Welcome, everyone. It's 8:02, so let's kind of move into our main program for the day. Before we do that, though, I want to take just a quick moment to thank our sponsors, and we've got a few sponsors that make this program possible every week. It takes a lot of resources to run through this every single week and keep this cadence going. So we want to really give a lot of thanks to the sponsors that help to get the word out, support our operations, and keep bringing people to the table to expand these conversations as well. And I'm going to drop some links into the chat as well for everybody to check out. If you would please just take a moment to drop by the websites of each of these companies, learn a little bit about them. And if you have an opportunity to reach out to them and give them an opportunity to compete for your business or your company's business, give them an opportunity. They're supporting you. You don't have to do business with everybody, but give them a shot at earning your business along the way. Method is a digital agency that does design, product strategy, and product development, especially in the digital transformation space, is digging in really deeply into customer experience and digital strategy, and has a wide variety of success stories you can check out on their website to give you a full breadth of what Method can do. Sophion has been supporting product management and innovation for 20-ish years. They recently launched Acclaim Products, which is a dashboard suite for product managers to bring your metrics and KPIs in alignment with your product development process and really make everything visible and easy to manage. And they've got a great free trial of Acclaim Products that you can go check out and see how you can use it to help your product practice. Genuine Parts Company is looking to transform themselves, and they're looking for top product management talent, people who understand modern product management and would like to come help evangelize that within a 100-year-old company and transition them to a modern digital company. Go to productcoffee.com/GPC, and you'll find job listings for product management roles that are open in Atlanta and around the country. Pardon me. And certainly, last but not least at all, is our good friend John Mansour with Product Management University, who's been supporting Product Camp and Product Coffee since the very beginning. John, why don't you say hello and tell everybody a little bit about Product Management University?
Thanks, Jason. Good morning. Nice to see everybody. And for those of you that I haven't met, nice to meet you. I look forward to joining the conversation here. So for those of you who don't know us, We train product managers, and Lisa, keep up the good work with the portfolio management. We also train product marketing managers, pre-sales solution consultants, and customer success managers. So, Jason, back to your point about outcomes, and that's really what we focus on. Start with the outcome, and you'll find the biggest problems. That way, you're solving real things. So that's Product Manager University, but continuing with our top-down discovery theme. So I published a free ebook a few weeks ago. In July, I'm doing a 2-hour hands-on workshop on customer and prospect discovery. And I would say for all of us in product management, it's really what I'm going to teach is how to become a skilled facilitator. So, to say that we are emotionally invested in our products is an understatement. And unfortunately, that's a liability when you are facilitating one-on-one discovery meetings or customer advisory boards. And we're going to talk about both. And so it's $249, and you're going to walk away with some great tools, the conversational discovery guide, and some battle cards for executive, senior manager, and user discovery meetings that'll help guide you through those meetings and get the information you need to set your product direction and make sure you're hitting the value mark every step of the way. And I'll post the links up here in the chat. But again, nice to be with everybody. And I'm looking forward to this AI conversation, because I think it's going to be, when AI grows up, it's going to be a tremendous complement to how we do market, customer, prospect discovery.
I agree. That's a great call out, John. Thank you very much. And that sounds like a great workshop as well, a great course as well on the on discovery facilitation. And what's the name of that workshop?
It is called Top-Down Customer and Prospect Discovery.
All right.
I just threw it up into the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for your support, and welcome back. All right. So today we're going to be digging into some real world learnings around AI, both discovering what AI can be used for and how some companies are thinking about using these new technologies in their product offerings. And we'll get to that in just a quick moment. I would like to invite everyone, if you haven't already done so, or if you don't know about this, would it jump over to productcoffee.com/notes in a web browser. Open up a separate browser and go to productcoffee.com/notes. And this is the Google Doc that we set up every week. And the first thing you want to do is you want to click the little star on that document so that you can save it in your own Google Drive or bookmark it so that you can come back to it, because it's going to stay out there forever for you, or at least as long as Google Drive is there. And we'll take notes together as a group as we have our discussion today. The idea is to participate as a team, take those notes, ask questions in the document so they become a part of the record of this session, and you'll have access to that for as long as you need it. So you can come back and look up things that you wanted to remember. And by sharing your own insights in this document, you'll learn more by sharing it immediately as you go, and you'll catch things that other people might have missed. So don't rely on your own notes. Let's do it as a group, and would love to see everybody jumping into that document and saving it in your own drive. I also, before we get into the main program, I want to see Allison is here, and Allison, we haven't quite updated the some of the coding on the book club page yet. We'll get to that in the next couple of days. We're about to start up our next book club, and you can still sign up for it on the book club page, even though it's got the last book listed. We'll still put you on the invitation list for the new one. But Allison, why don't you talk about the summer book club here?
Yeah, sure. So in true summer fashion, we're changing things up and making it a little easier and breezier. So the commitment to read a whole book can be challenging for some. So we're going with a smaller series over the summer. There'll be a June event and a July event, and perhaps an August event. We're still working out the details of that. But the next event is Friday, the 23rd. At 10 a.m. We're actually going to dive into AI as well. So you'll hear some similar topics today, as well as some other opportunities for you to connect. But we're going to ask folks to watch or listen to a recent Lenny's podcast. And then we'll bring everybody together on the 23rd at 10 to discuss. So, right, if you have time to listen or watch and then come and join the conversation, that's going to be our goal on the 23rd. So we should have some information later this week. You'll see us out on socials in the premium Slack channel for our premium members with the information on how to sign up. But productcoffee.com/book club will get you to take where you need to be today.
If I understood
right.
that right, Allison, if they just register for book club, you will
Yep.
get all the updates then directly, however they come.
Yep, there's
Slack,
a
LinkedIn,
form.
put your
Yep.
face. all
Yep,
the
it's a
things.
form on the page, and that gets you the invite for the meeting link. And so that's easy and accountable. It's already there. You just have to show up and maybe do a little bit of listening.
Look, as a former accountant, I'm getting really tired of this word accountable. All right.
Understand. I'll shamelessly plug book club is really amazing. We're trying to get some additional folks interested in it because the value of having conversations about what you consume builds knowledge. And so that's where we're trying to focus our efforts over the summer. Cool.
All right. Thank you, Allison. And but now let's get into our program for the day. And I want to welcome back. We spoke just a moment ago to Daniel and Matt, and we've got might have a couple of other folks on the call here as well. But I want to just start out by, we've asked Daniel and Matt to come on today's program because they're doing some interesting things just in a few different directions in finding out what AI is good for. And I want to start with you, Daniel. First of all, let's introduce you again real quickly. Daniel, go ahead and tell everybody your full title and what you do at LeaseQuery.
Sure. Yeah. Director of product management. And I work on the discovery side of product management. So kind of up until the build portion. And at that point, our product managers kind of work with product owners to actually execute on the build itself. So a lot of what I'm doing is looking a lot further out in advance, like strategic landscape. And so I'm not just looking at this year or next year, but a couple of years out for us, which is exciting.
Excellent. And Matthew, why don't you introduce yourself again now that we're kind of into the live part of the program, and tell everybody what it is that you're working on these days.
Sure. My name is Matt Burris. I'm one of the partners at Savvy Tinker Studios. We create companies from scratch focused in the B2B SaaS space. And of course, we're using a lot of AI tools because we build companies from scratch. So it's that 0 to 1 stage. We build startups. So we do play around a lot in AI, and we look at using AI in some of the companies we build. And I was fortunate enough when I first came to Atlanta that I got to go through the Flashpoint program at Georgia Tech, which heavily focused on cognitive bias and behavioral economics when you're doing customer discovery, which I think we touched on earlier. One of the big problems is we kind of fall in love with our ideas and then we go search for confirmation, and that's a really bad idea. And if you look at CB Insight's top 20 reasons for startup failure, number 1, no market need. So that kind of tells me that either somebody wasn't listening to what their customers were saying, or they weren't even asking. Either way, it was a really bad call.
They had a really neat idea, but it just wasn't something that really solved a problem in a way that needed to be solved, or they couldn't get traction because they didn't frame it with the right problem.
If you're ever on the investor side and you get startup pitches coming your direction, you're going to see this play out a lot. And you just look at the product, you're like, there's obviously no need for this. Like, no one is going to spend money. This is not a problem worth solving. And you really can't have that discussion often with the founder because it's not going to go well.
Yep. You got to be dispassionate. Thanks. So we're going to come back around and we're going to talk about some of the things you're discovering and what you're learning. I want to start with, let's switch over here to Daniel though. Daniel, I want to start with you because I've talked to a few people from LeaseQuery, and I know you're in a business that covers a space that's traditionally pretty conservative on the, lease accounting you deal with a lot of accountants. So you have a fairly conservative business model, even though you're growing very aggressively, or at least a conservative business environment, highly regulated. And but when ChatGPT launched last year publicly and started blowing up the scene and creating a lot of questions, Lease Query did not just say, "Oh my God, this is a dangerous technology. We got to stay away from it." You kind of said, "Let's go figure something out." Tell me a little bit about what you did over at Lease Query to figure out the implications of these technologies.
Yeah, a little bit of background first. So publicly in October, we announced an acquisition of some AI technology, right? And then if you all remember, ChatGPT and OpenAI kind of launched in November publicly and just started going hockey stick crazy. And so I think in our blood, we've always been trying to solve a couple different problems, right? Not only for customers, but internally. And so I think that is a little bit of context on why I think our willingness to push the boundary and explore was people were open to it. But when we talk about ChatGPT, right? So I think we saw early on, right, that could potentially benefit one of our key stakeholders, which is our 35 CPAs that we have on staff that provide excellent support to our customers, right? Because we're such a niche product, each one of these accountants help out our customers in various ways, whether it's helping them understand the guidance or implement our product. And so with that, right, the guidance is about 1,200 pages long. And so a real quick Control F of the PDF document is very difficult to do, right? Because the one word that you type in will show up thousands of times. And so something that is able to help you narrow in on the exact kind of question and situation was at the forefront of our push towards some OpenAI.
Can I, yeah, let me step back for just a minute, because it occurs to me there's probably quite a few people on the call that may have heard Lease Query's name, but doesn't know exactly what it is that Lease Query does and what lease accounting is and the space that you're in. Could you,
they're questioning leases. It's very obvious. They're questioning leases. I like this. I support these goals.
Can you tell us a little bit about Lease Query and the business?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So in about 2017, I think it was, the board of all the expert accountants came together and said, hey, we want to redo how assets show up on the balance sheet. And one of those things was to kind of right size having leases show up on the balance sheet, which some people argued and back and forth, and they ended up with like, hey, we really need to have this information there to really expose your liabilities, right? And in the government space, they took it a little bit further and even said any kind of subscription software, we would like that also kind of exposed in folks, so people have transparency into kind of your liabilities. And so our software essentially solves that problem, which is it makes it, it's like the TurboTax for lease accounting. It really helps you put in all that information and do some crazy amortization schedules and stuff like that, but very niche and very relevant for a lot of public companies who need to report on this. So all of that was baked around a transition date where they had to transition from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things on a certain date. And so there was a very big push in our industry to get on some type of software that would help you kind of manage all of these different types of use cases.
Gotcha. Thank you. So now when you're talking about the guidance and this 1,200 pages, let's put that in context and talk about what the implications of that are.
Yeah. So again, our software solves that 1,200 pages, right? So super niche product. Yeah. Again, like I said, lots of edge cases, all of that kind of stuff. But essentially that guidance is what people basically pay us to replicate in software. So essentially they are able to put in inputs and we give them the outputs that the guidance requires.
Okay. And so now we can come back around to kind of the discovery process that you went to. You identified some opportunities to help your 35 CPAs that you have on staff that serve your customers and help them get set up. And what did that look like? What are some of the other things that you learned along the way?
Yeah. So I think it's important to kind of note, right? Like we'd obviously been onboarding a lot more customers. So the amount of super complicated questions and answers, right, just exponentially went up. And so that problem for them is like, it's hard to scale in the accounting industry because you're seeing a decrease in the number of accountants enter the field, right? So we've seen about a 17% decrease in the number of new accountants graduating and entering that space. And so, and then also, I think it was like, I think I saw a stat the other day by Gartner. It was about 27% less CPAs than 3 or 4 years ago. And so with that, right, we couldn't just go hire a bunch more people to help support these customers. We needed to figure out some ways to help them become more efficient and get to the answers quicker. And so that's kind of what set up this scenario of taking a look at some OpenAI technologies to see how we could potentially help get them into the guidance and exactly where they need to be a little bit quicker.
That's a really interesting take. We hear a lot of hype in the media about how AI is going to take jobs, or people are concerned that AI is going to take jobs, but you're dealing with a situation in your industry where you don't have enough people to do the job. And so we can potentially leverage AI to help fill the gaps where the people just aren't there to do the work. That's a really interesting take. So did you, as you were going through this process of discovery and examination, did you have some things that didn't work the way you hoped that they would? Were there any lessons, pits to avoid?
Yeah, absolutely.
That you learned along the way?
Yeah. So I think at first, right, so ChatGPT came out and you couldn't necessarily address it with a PDF. So how do you get this information? And it can only take so much information. How can you get this information into a system that could potentially help you answer questions, right? And for us, it was rather difficult. So we put it on pause for a little bit, right, after not a lot of success. And it wasn't until OpenAI really said, hey, you can touch our APIs now. This was in early March, I think March 1st, actually. You can interact with our APIs and, and start to utilize it that way. Also, we will not use that data that you interact with us through our API to enhance our platform. It will be kind of your data. So those were two kind of milestone points for us, right? That open up like, hey, we own our data. So whatever we kind of put in there. And then, and two, that they really allowed you to start interacting in new ways, right? Having an API available. So we put together some Google Colab kind of documents for a quick and dirty kind of MVP and built out an embedding that an embedding is essentially taking all of the information from the PDF and putting it into this super dynamic database that you can then address, and it helps break up the information with OpenAI. And then we created kind of like our own chat interface where we could question it and see how the results were.
Great. And so I think that's a good setup and startup. Let's switch over to Matt here for a minute. Matt, you're taking a couple of different approaches. You talked about using tools in your day-to-day work and some of the experiments that you've run to see what will help and what'll work for you. But you've also talked about looking at a lot of potential companies and startup ideas that are leveraging these technologies as kind of part of their product development process. So I'd be really interested to understand a little bit about your discovery process and how you're thinking about the model that you're taking to discover and explore these technologies in the work that you're doing.
So often we kind of start with, what are we actually trying to do? And we're going to go out and, find a couple of AI tools. ChatGPT is fantastic in a lot of use cases, because often we're starting with text, or we can use that text to go into other platforms like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and create visuals if we want to do that. There's a couple of big challenges though, and I'm really curious to see if Daniel can expand on this a little bit in his work and what he's seen. But if anybody on the call has leveraged ChatGPT, you know that it has an amazing amount of knowledge, but there's no context until you give it that context. It's a brilliant idiot. It is an amazing, like a PhD level intern, right?
Mm-hmm.
The amount of knowledge it has is amazing, but if you don't give it very good instructions, you're not going to get anything usable out. And when you provide feedback to it, well, I think you run into a few interesting phenomena. Like if we're going to give feedback to a person, we're aware that they're going to interpret this feedback and they, you know, emotionally as well. If we try to temper our feedback to ChatGTP, what ends up happening is it interprets that like, oh, it's not, I don't need to be pushed as far. Oh, you tempered it, so it's not as big a deal. If you're very blunt with it, it actually responds very, very, very well. So there's some, you know, interesting things that kind of come out of using these tools, and you start noticing its the limitations a lot. And I would also make the tools like ChatGTP and Midjourney very general in nature, can do a lot of different stuff. And then you have the implementations of AI in different tool stacks, and hopefully they've made it more of an expert system, kind of like what Daniel's done. Too often I see just, oh, we just took something that ChatGTP can do and we put it over here and it's great and you should invest and we should like all love it. And like, no, that's no. We're going to move beyond that very, very, very quickly. But you do see some tools that implement it very, very well in very specific use cases. And one of my favorites I've been playing with is Descript, which is a video editing tool, but instead of editing the video, you edit the transcript. So one click, remove all filler words. Like that's where you start. And oh, you want to replace a word? Oh, you can, and it can replace it with your voice. So it's, you know, amazing implementation in that sense. Very, very niche product, but fantastic.
Yep, I know that tool. I'm a real fan of that specific tool, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to be using it pretty heavily this week.
It's a brilliant little twist, right? Because anybody who's done video editing, you're just so focused on the timeline. Like, what's the waveform of, you know, the voice? Did I clip this right so it comes together well? And on Descripts, like, just delete done.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a great example. So let's talk about how so you mentioned in kind of your introduction there a moment ago that one of the things that you see a lot of in this kind of investor space that you're in is you see a lot of ideas coming to the table that just don't necessarily, you've got a solution looking for a problem. And I'm curious, when you're thinking about advising the startups that you're advising and exploring these technologies, what are you teaching and learning about how they go about evaluating these shiny objects to help them solve a problem when they're thinking about how they're going to implement these things in their technology?
So one of the first startups that I did was a metal 3D printing startup in the middle of the 3D printer hype. So I think this is a really interesting example because we're in another hype cycle. It's called ChatGTP and generative AI overall. When you are in one of those hype cycles, you know, how do you cut through the noise to see what is actually valuable and what's just complete BS? And one of the investors, when we were building the metal 3D printer company, Matterfab, you know, really laid into us, like, what are your unit economics? Show me in very, very explicit detail how this is going to disrupt the rest of the market. And that's one of those things you can easily use in a lot of cases. Like, show me what the value is. And if you can articulate the value in a very clear way, I'm just going to assume there is none. And, you know, one of these spaces I spent a little time in was, you know, blockchain. And we looked at this when I was at NCR. And this is a space that's had this problem for a long time. It's very difficult to explain what the specific value often was. And, you know, we found a few use cases where you could really very clearly articulate it. One of them was where we had an asset that multiple different independent parties had to have access to. and they all had at the time paper-based logs. So suddenly, if you could digitize this, everybody could see what was going on in real time. And it just, in that use case, made complete sense.
Gotcha. And so then what were some of the hiccups along the way that gave you some really good clears? Oh, we shouldn't have explored that direction.
Oh, well, so I always start, yes, I'm in innovation, I'm in the startup world, but my first question always goes to, what's the value? What's the problem we're solving? What is the value of solving that problem? And until we can articulate that value in a meaningful way, what are we doing? Like, I don't care about shiny objects. I don't care about technology. There's a million ways to solve every problem. What's the most economical way to do it? What's the best way to do it to solve the problem? Those are often very different things. So, is AI the right tool? Does AI actually have the capability to deliver on this? And this is an area that I think we're going to start seeing more and more walls as we, explore generative AI, where it just can't cross that wall. And it hits a fundamental limitation, which isn't what we need from that product. I think we kind of see that a little bit in ChatGPT, where favorite example is just this last week, I was asking it for use cases or examples, of cognitive bias in business decisions and industry. And it started giving me an example in the beef industry. And in the next sentence, it started talking about prune juice.
Okay.
And it's like, wait, how are these connected? And I went back and asked, like, hey, what's going on there? Like, oh, sorry, that was two examples. So it had started talking about, and then halfway through, context switched to another. And you're just like, what?
I'm going to jump in and say it was hilarious to me when Matt told me this example, because if you know me, I get squirrel anyway. And so I actually thought this was something real he was telling me. And I was like, oh, they use prune juice to color beef? I mean, that sounds awful. But as a vegetarian, I guess I don't really care.
I'll paste it in chat because it was kind of hilarious to kind of see that unfold. And it's just one of those things, like, no matter what it comes back with, sanity check it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great first cut, but it has some quirks.
Yeah. I have used, I experimented with ChatGPT specifically early on in doing some industry research on a project that I was working on. And I found lots of, everybody was figuring out hallucination and GPT's very confident inaccuracies. And boy, it speaks more authoritatively than I do sometimes, and knows less than I do sometimes. But the interesting experience was there that even when it was wrong, it did provide useful constructs for thinking about problems and thinking about the research, even when you had to go back and validate and discover that things were wrong. But you can't, at this stage of development, you can't use it without a highly critical mind. A highly critical eye turned toward it. But and I want to switch back over to you, Daniel. And I actually am gonna before I do that, I'm actually gonna draft John into this conversation a little bit as well, because in looking at what you're talking about there, Matt, I think we are in a space where, and I know, John, you like to caution people against problem-based thinking necessarily. Don't start with the problem. At the same time, there are general opportunities and targets and outcomes that products are set up to achieve, to drive towards. And for me, at least, evaluating these technologies requires you to double down on that perspective, know your outcomes, know the opportunities that you're trying to solve for. Fall in love with what success looks like, not from an outcome perspective, not from a product perspective. And that helps give a better evaluation of, can these technologies help me get to that outcome better? Would you build on that, John, or think of it a different way?
Yeah, and it's, the whole thing about problem, and it's really just how we're programmed to think, right? When we start with a problem, the path forward goes directly to solution instead of taking a step back and saying, okay, is that a real problem? And if the answer is yes, the next question is, why do we even care about solving this problem in the bigger picture? Okay. And I think sometimes that's where, when we start with a problem, we don't take 2 steps back to understand what I refer to as the big why. And then it just makes everything difficult, because as we go forward solving that problem, we inevitably have to ask those questions at some point. And sometime the product is half baked, and then we find out, oh, this is what you're trying to do. Oh no, the product design isn't going in that direction, right? And so, to me, the whole thing is about, and again, as artificial intelligence gets more intelligent and can put the context behind it, some of these problems, when we say, are these problems real? I think it will be able to connect the dots to say, oh, yes, there's a new best practice accounting standard that has to be met. And, companies aren't able to do this, or it would take, a month of Sundays to get it done. And so there is value in doing this because everyone has to meet this best practice standard by this date, so on and so forth, right? And to me, it's just more about context and just simplifying what you do forward. So if I understand the big why, as I refer to it, then all I have to do is figure out, why can't I get there? And then we build our product around eliminating those obstacles in pecking order from largest to smallest. And, in my mind, it's just the simple way to know you are delivering guaranteed measurable value.
Yep. Absolutely.
And the whole thing about the outcome is, a well-defined outcome can always be quantified. And to me, that's the most important thing. Well, it's like, what's the value of this? To me, the well-defined outcome says, well, here's the value to the customer. And then it's pretty easy to figure out what the value back to us is.
Yeah. And that de-risks that evaluation significantly. You can still have risk around, is the technology going to work as expected? But you can at least de-risk the exploration time if you can get that high level understanding very quickly and hypothesize whether it's going to move you towards your outcome more readily.
Yeah, I mean, building the product is still the hard part. Designing and building it is still the hard part, where the heavy lifting is. But at least if you have a clear target and the hurdles you have to get over, it makes it a whole lot easier to figure out which technologies and enablers you need to actually get to the solution.
Right. So Daniel, we talked specifically about ChatGPT, and I'm curious, as you're doing these explorations and you're looking way out in the future, are there other technologies and tools? You mentioned you made an acquisition around an AI tool set, and I'd love you to tell us, or a company that was AI enabled. I'd love you to tell us a little bit more, anything you can, about that as well, and maybe some other directions that you're looking in and that you're keeping an eye on right now.
Sure. Yeah, I did want to echo one thing that Matt was saying real quick about the hallucinations. And I posted an article in there that you guys can read about a lawyer taking what ChatGPT had and presenting it in court and being, it made up and hallucinated some fake cases to base his whole premise off of. And we're not talking about just a normal court. We're talking about the court that saw like 9/11 and sees like basically every single major financial crime in the US. So the 7th District Court in New York City. So
wow.
Just be careful with kind of what you're doing there, and definitely echoing Jason, your sentiment about like maybe the framework, but also taking a look at what it produces and validating it.
It sounds like the lawyer was the one with artificial intelligence here.
Artificial something, that's for sure.
All right. Back to your question though. So yeah, we announced a lease abstract technology acquisition back in the fall, and basically what I can tell you is what's in the press release. That's about it.
Okay, that's fine.
As of right now, maybe in the future, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about what it is. But a lease abstract, basically, OCR technology that could abstract the leases and help our clients get them into our system quicker.
Okay, so and then are there other startups or technologies or AI capabilities out there besides that one, besides ChatGPT, that you've been looking at as you're kind of thinking down the future? Things that you say, oh, that's interesting, or even things that you've looked at and said, we're not interested in this because.
Yeah, so us using the OpenAI APIs and framework, right? Let's tie that off real quick. We did learn a lot, right? We learned a lot about the hallucinations early on in early March. And for a super technical accounting based where our brand is, we have 35 CPAs on staff, so accuracy is key. That technology was not necessarily the key, right? And it comes back down to fundamentally how OpenAI or generative AI does its predictions, right? So basically it takes an entire set of data and it's only as good as predicting the next best thing. So it puts a kind of percentage around what it thinks the next best thing is. And that can be potentially randomized. They call it temperature in AI, but it could be randomized or it could be the highest matching thing or whatever. So understanding that fundamentally, and that's super dumbed down version. I don't want to get into the super technical details of that, but like the dumbed down version is it's basically predicting the next best thing. And that's not very good when it comes to accounting standards, right? Because they're standards, they have to be met in a certain way. And I think that's what we learned.
Very good.
Technologies that we're looking at. Yeah. So there's a couple technologies that I've seen, and I may not drop the company names out there yet. But there's a technology out of San Francisco right now that is taking a different approach to AI in the sense of you're typically putting in inputs into like ChatGPT or whatever. It's doing that on its behalf. So it's taking your embedding and it's asking millions of different questions on top of your embedding. And it essentially is trying to generate every single permutation of what that embedding looks like so that when you go there, you already have an answer, right? And then they're layering on top of that this expertise. So going like, in our case, we would have our 35, CPAs take a look at those results and go, yep, thumbs up. That's a validated result, right? And so they're layering on that human element on top of the OpenAI engine.
Gotcha. Matt, you talked about Descript a little bit, and are there others that you're looking at, as you're thinking about both from a tooling and helping us spin things up quickly, but also from an interesting technology, you think there's some innovation opportunity to build around? A lot of people are taking OpenAI has made that API so accessible that you can really do a lot of innovative things, whether there are sites that are tracking some of the companies, some of the products that people are creating around OpenAI's tech, and they can't keep up with all the innovation. Are there other interesting capabilities and companies out there that you're watching and looking at?
So there's a few that we've started to use and just play around with. Last week, started using Midjourney to create some logos and visuals. It's much better at visuals than logos. Constraining it that way, it just doesn't work nearly as well. I've used some really, really good descriptions of it. It still creates some very interesting stuff, and it's not consistent.
Have you tried any of the Photoshop plugins for that?
I haven't tried the Photoshop plugin yet, but I have tried some of the UI AI tools to create full UI sets for products, and that sort of worked. It's nothing I would put in front of anybody, but it gave us a ton of assets to repurpose and build something up much quicker than we would have starting from scratch. A template might have been just as fast, but then you have to go search for the template. So there's a little value there, and very early days, right? This just started to get released. Another interesting one was put in a short, maybe 2-sentence description of a website landing page, and it creates it all for you. And that actually worked very, very well for what was given. Still have to tweak a few things, but starting from something that is built and looks beautiful is always much easier than a blank page. So yeah, there spaces, but it's very early, and we're going to see a lot more experimentation. A lot of it is not going to work very well, but some of it is really going to streamline, and it's all about really designing that expertise into the AI. And that takes a lot of talent. And that's really going to be the bottleneck for a lot of these systems. And you'll see it very quickly when you start trying any of these platforms, whether they've really embedded any of that expertise. And either they're very early in their journey, or that might be a company that is building more in and around hype than anything substantial.
Very good. And I'm interested in opening up the floor to others who have experimented and thought about some interesting technology. I know, Brian, you guys are looking at some interesting things, but you're fairly early stage. I'm just wondering, for the other folks that are out here on the call, are there some specific capabilities and tools that you've been looking at that you found particularly impactful, or that you've discounted and say, you know what, there's a lot of hype here, this is a little interesting, but it's nowhere near a state of being able to create anything productive yet? I know one of the things that we talked about early in the call, and John, you mentioned the notion of customer and prospect discovery and market discovery using some of these capabilities. I can certainly share a little bit of my experience, but I'd like to kind of get some more of your thoughts on that, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the hardest things for product managers to do, because the day-to-day minutia, and you never really have time to get into the zone, is to really, understand the big picture of what's happening in your target market segments out there. Like, if you target healthcare, what are the key things driving healthcare in the C-suite, and how do those filter down to where our products play, or banking, or anywhere else, And I think as the content becomes, more and more rich out there, I think this will help product managers in a big way to understand, like, big picture, how and where are my products relevant in the grand scheme of things? Is something my product can do or already does on the A list of my target customers, or is it on the B list? And even if it's on the B list, can we still make money at it, right? And so to me, it's going to help product managers do a lot of market research, shortcut market research, right? Because right now you got to read a whole lot of things. You got to go out and talk to people, a lot of boots on the ground. And I still suggest you do that as a compliment. But I think when AI gets more mature, it's going to really, it's going to make a big leap in terms of giving product managers a big head start on that, to at least set some direction and know what kind of conversations they should be having with customers.
Very good. One of the things that I feel like I very successfully have used ChatGPT for is not so much in the customer specific discovery process, but in the market discovery process and in data analysis. I use with ChatGPT, I use the Superhuman Chrome plugin. And if you're not familiar with that, you can search for it, just Superhuman for ChatGPT. And what it does is it automates a few tasks that you might want to implement with ChatGPT, and it will let you bring in much longer bodies of text. So when we were working on the AI and product management survey that we did a couple months back, I was able to bring all of the verbatim responses into a CSV and copy and paste those in, and it was much larger than the typical token limit for ChatGPT, but I was able to drop all of those into ChatGPT, and it breaks it up into chunks and loads all that data in. And then I was able to chat with ChatGPT about the data itself and have it quote back specific responses that supported its statements. And you'll all see that in the report that's coming out. And we had also done the same exercise manually with the Product Coffee leadership team. We had gone through those responses, dropped them into Miro, done some clustering exercises. And the results that we came out with were very similar in structure, although ChatGPT, because it was able to look at that at a different scale or at a different granularity, it did identify a couple of concepts and themes that we had missed as a team. Now, I would have never been comfortable using just one or the other. It was the combination of the two that I think led to some really great insights that we're pretty anxious to share with you. We're running a little bit behind on getting that out because it still does require a lot of human work to get these studies out like this. But when we're thinking about discovery as well, just training the model properly and asking the right questions of it gets you much better answers. And some of the examples that we've heard about, the attorneys that you referred us to, where they had the bad data, where they had the bad information, I'd be really interested to understand how they even approached that line of questioning and the prompts that they engineered. Not only did they not validate well, but I'd be really curious. I've certainly seen clearly that proper prompt engineering yields much better results, and wonder about experiences that our panelists may have had with kind of some of those experiments along the way with asking the right question in the right way.
Yeah, I think it does yield better results, but I think it depends on the categorization of what you're talking to it about, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, right, I've experimented with it using fictitious databases. And again, I want to clarify, we did not use any confidential information of our customers. We only use publicly available information when doing experiments here. And so using some fictitious databases, right, it would make up table names. So like if I had it write a SQL query or something like that, it would hallucinate table names that are factually incorrect, right? Even though it has right in front of it and it's accessed our tables, right? It would still create, add an S or something like that. And you still physically have to go through and go like, okay, where exactly is the the made up information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Prompt engineering, if you design that prompt right, it does make a very big difference. The other thing I'd layer in there is your feedback based on what ChatGPT came back with. Often the first thing that it comes back with is not that great. And providing some really clear feedback helps dial that answer in a lot. Obviously, you still have to, verify everything it's actually saying. But yeah, it does improve over time. Confidential data wise, we have access to the API, so we can feed stuff directly in there if we're working with something that is confidential. In the startup world, when you're in the very, very early stage, unless you're talking to ChatGPT about patentable stuff, which why would you? There's pretty much not much of an issue because you don't know what you're going to build yet. And so the risk is minimal, but it is something everybody should be aware of because everything you're putting in is adding to the data set.
Yep. Lisa commented back here earlier in the chat as well about being careful with confidential information and masking critical data, which absolutely, and thinking about getting the right construct for an answer and then plugging in your own data is a really powerful skill set to develop as well. That kind of helps with that. You raise a really good point, Matt, though, about unless you're talking about patentable things, patentable technology. And I even find myself wondering about the true risk there, and how OpenAI is training their model is even evolving daily. We drop data in; that language gets used to help further train the model. I don't know if there have been any studies or research or clear examples of how exposing that data to OpenAI has actually caused trade secrets to get outside of that model. I know there's a big case with Samsung loading a bunch of information that created a security incident for Samsung. I don't know if there was actual damage done by that. I haven't researched it yet. I'm curious if anybody knows about that. But I'm going to come back to it because see both Holly and John have their hands up. So let's jump in with Holly first.
took me a minute to figure out how to lower that hand. Thank you. So mine, maybe it was a question, but more a thought that sprang to mind. And Matt, maybe something for you to table, think about. I know it falls directly into your space, both on the AI as well as the bias. But I was kind of having a silly thought when Jason was talking about how the AI went back through something the product coffee leadership team looked at and found things that we missed. I'm like, but is it biased? Because it's already done this in your example with the beef stuff. So I'm like, did it really find stuff we missed, or did it maybe make up stuff we missed, or does it have the potential to be biased? And how do we detect that when, frankly, again, my eyes glaze over anytime I read anything written by Chat GPT, because it uses every sentence starts exactly the same. That's one of the reasons you don't have the results out yet, because it sounds like it was written by a robot.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the products we're looking at building out is in the product management space around cognitive bias. So we've done some experiments in this area. And it definitely comes back with biased suggestions, biased answers. If you ask for survey questions, it will put the order wrong, and that will in very, very poor manner. It's not consistent. It's not an expert. And even if you provide it the rules, it won't follow them all the time. So this is not a solution for a lot of these problems. And
so it is like an
you're
intern.
the expert, like you're not necessarily going to see where it made the mistake. So it can be very, very dangerous when you try to have it be the expert when you have no way to validate it.
You give it the rules and the guidelines, and just like an intern or certain employees, it just does whatever the hell it wants anyway.
That's right.
We got just a couple more minutes, but I do want to jump over here to John real quickly as well. So John.
Yes, and I'm just going to tag on to Matthew's point there. And I think, for the foreseeable future, product managers have nothing to worry about in terms of AI taking our jobs. I think what it's really good at right now is it can tell us a lot of things that are swirling around us. It cannot make decisions for us. It doesn't have enough information. Or you think about all the things that go into making product priority decisions that these AI engines may never know. Well, they know our squeaky wheel customers that are, the big customer that's going to bully us into doing something that nobody else wants. The deal in the pipeline that, we're going to detour our roadmap for. I mean, all these crazy things that go into our product decisions. It might get there someday, but for the foreseeable future, I think our best use of AI is to understand all the things swirling around us that will help guide us to make some good decisions. But I wouldn't be looking forward to make decisions for me for the 100 reasons stated in this conversation.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the top of the hour. I want to thank Daniel Forner from Least Query and Matt Burris from Savvy Tinker Studios. I want to thank you for bringing your experiences and your insights and sharing them with us. I learned a lot. I think it's really interesting to explore the trails that others have already blazed so that we can accelerate our own learning. And I really want to thank you for being here and sharing that. And always, John, thank you for letting me draft you in as part of the conversation and bringing big game. And Holly, always a great contributor and adding to the thought and interpretation there as well. So really value all of you being here and participating in that. Next week, Holly, you want to talk about what we've got coming next week at Product Coffee?
Sure, absolutely. Next week, I'm super excited. We have Victoria Young, who is the COO of Outpace. If you attended our June workshop that Robbie Meta did, she's his cohort there, and she is going to talk about AI tools for product managers. So we've talked in this space about what are the best tools, to be using to try to solve some of our problems in the day-to-day with all of the wrappers around it that we just talked about here. What's safe. So she's got some thoughts on that, and she's going to come and have a chat with us. So I'm super excited.
Yep, me too. So thanks for reaching out and making that happen, Holly.
My pleasure.
So, all right. So that brings us to a close for this week. And so we'll see you back next week. We also watch your email inboxes today. We should have an announcement going out. We are launching the very first of our AI and product management in-person forums in Atlanta on July 27th. You'll get a call for speakers in your inbox on that. We're test marketing it in Atlanta with plans to do fast follows in a bunch of other markets around the country. So would love to get everybody involved in that. And yes, we are looking at the DC area as an option, as that whole kind of region, probably something in DC or a little bit of Arlington area, possibly early next year as well. So keep your eyes on it. So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll have a happy hour and some cider. So thanks everybody for coming. Great to see you all today. Have a great week. And I'm going to end the live stream now. So for those on YouTube, thanks for joining us. And if anybody wants to stick around and have some more coffee and chat for a couple